Good morning, Year 7s. I've got some very keen students today to help me out with this demonstration. I'd like to give you a bit of a demonstration about concentration. So hopefully you've already looked through the PowerPoint a little bit and you've looked at the word solute, solvent, and when you put them together you create a solution. A very common solvent that we use is water. It's actually that commonly used that we call it the universal solvent. Now, if a solute mixes with a solvent to produce a solution, it means that the solute is soluble. Okay, and that means that the solute dissolves in the solvent to produce a solution. And the example I used on the PowerPoint was if we add salt and water, we can end up with seawater or brine or saline solution. Okay, so I've just added the solvent into the beakers. So my solvent is going to be the water. I've decided, because I can, I'm going to use copper sulfate as my solute. Okay, that's not the use by date, that's the date we bought it. So I'm going to use copper to sulfate, and that is my solute. So this is actually a solid. This is going to be solid, it's in the form of powder. My solvent is my water. So solute, solvent. Remember, it's going to produce a solution. What I'm going to do now is I want to make 3 different concentrations. So 3 solutions that have a different concentration. The first one, I'm not going to put much copper sulfate at all. I'm going to put about a quarter of a spatula. In the second one, I'm going to put a whole spatula. And in the third one, I'm going to put 2 spatulas. My good students look after my copper sulfate for me. Thank you. Now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to stir this to get the copper sulfate to dissolve.
Even now you can probably see a bit of a difference between the beakers.
As you can see, the blue colouring is slightly different. So the copper sulfate, remember that was the solute, and I've added that into the solvent. Added a small amount of solute into this beaker, more solute into this beaker, and about double in this beaker. We would call this solution, this pale blue solution, we would call it dilute. There is a small amount of solute in the solvent. The second beaker, it's got a more intense blue colouring, so I added more solute to the solvent. It is called concentrated. So we have dilute, we have concentrated, and our third one, which is very intense in colour, it's a lot darker blue, and I'll show you in the beaker in a second that there's a lot of solid still left on the bottom. So not all the solute could dissolve in the solvent. There wasn't enough solvent to dissolve that solute. So there's still solid particles on the bottom of this beaker. We would call this solution saturated. Now you might have heard of that term before. When it's raining, someone's been caught out in the rain and they come back in and they're drenched, they're all wet. They might say that they're saturated. So their clothes are saturated in water. They could wring it out. So we have dilute, concentrated, saturated solution. If we have a look from above, and I'll give you a closer view, you can see those intensities of that blue is very, very different. So we have a pale blue here, very pale. Nearly looks a lot white when I take it off. A darker blue here, darker blue. And this last one, if I pick it up, you should be able to see that solid on the bottom, that solute, it hasn't dissolved. Okay, so this is a saturated solution. There's one other thing that you could try here, students. You could do this at home. Of course, you can't use copper sulfate, but you could use salt, sugar, Milo, hot chocolate, anything that actually is soluble in water. So something that dissolves is called soluble. So you do need a soluble substance to try this at home. I want you to have a go, if you're able to, just grab a couple of glasses and maybe put some different temperature of water in there. Have one cold, have one warm, and have one hotted. Please don't use boiling. And see, is there a difference? Does the cold water dissolve more than the hot water, or does the hot water dissolve more solute than the cold water? Have a go. I'd like to thank my keen and eager helpers for today. Thank you very much. Thank you for looking after my copper sulfate. And that's all, folks.